Hey everybody, welcome. How are you? My name is Matt, and you can call me Coach. Hey, you know, in some countries, even to this day, there are countries that their leadership is the crown, the regal kings and queens and princesses and princes, you know, and for the most part, and in some cases, that crown basically still governs those countries in either a literal sense or in a figurative sense. Would you agree? Well, in the realm of horticulture, there is also a crown, albeit a much different one, of course. But as you're going to learn here today, you will find the huge, utmost importance that you got to pay attention to the crown when it comes to landscaping and your planting success. In fact, bury the crown, ladies and gentlemen, bury the crown, and I will guarantee you, you will suffer a quick and sured death, whether it be in 2 weeks or 5 months, but it will happen. And of course, I don't mean you, of course, I mean the plant, the expensive plants that we put in the ground in this day and age. So, hey, I'm glad you're here. Are you ready for a little education in the crown? Very good. Hey, Maestro, put down the Burger King hat. That's not the type of crown we're talking about today. Hey, I'm Matt, and you can call me Coach. Hey, every week I bring to you landscaping tips and tricks, design concepts, horticultural thoughts and theories in an easy to understand format so you guys, being educated now, can go out and tackle landscape projects yourself successfully, get the professional results you want, be a heck of a lot more reliant in this day and age, and save a boatload of money. You know, for the past 20 years, 20 plus years now, I have been a successful landscape designer and contractor, retail nursery manager, and college educated in ornamental horticulture. And I think if I bring that all together, I bring with me a lot of knowledge and experience that I want to impart and share with you, the new, modern, self-reliant, educated homeowner of today. Well, staying with the regal theme, I hope all is well in your realm. But on a serious note, aside from horticulture and everything else, I, as yard coach, would like to express my sincere condolences to the Crown of Great Britain, the Queen, and all her court for the passing of Prince Philip. I heard about that this week, and I'm sure that is a tragedy struck the Great Britain area. And I hope that the Crown, the family, and everybody, and the country is pulling through and supporting each other in that passing. I really do. Okay, so moving on. This week we are discussing the crown of a totally different nature, that of trees and shrubs. You know, ignoring that crown, and another part that I'm going to discuss with you later in the video, and it's a pretty much guaranteed success that you're going to fail. Does that make any sense to you? You know, a quick story. Probably about 15 years ago, I had a client that had this beautiful cedar tree in their front yard. It had to have been, I would say, 60, 70 years old, just a gorgeous specimen of a cedar tree. And this particular person decided to plant a raised bed with a stone retainer around all the base of that tree. And then they introduced small dwarf azaleas and hostas, ajuga and mosses. And God, you know, when you drove around the corner on the street and you saw this, it was beautiful. It really stood out, and people actually slowed down and stopped and looked at it. Well, after about 2 years, almost 3 years, something happened. And all of a sudden, all the needles in the cedar tree started to drop in a big way. And within 12 months, that cedar tree was dead. And I got a call, and I went over there to not only consult with him regarding what the heck happened to his tree, but also a cost to remove it. Now, I don't remove trees that large. I would have subbed that out to somebody else. But it was a classic example, a classic, very expensive example of crown rot. You know, he backfilled all the way up the crown on that tree and just rotted it out. And there was nothing that I could certainly do. There would not have been a certified arborist that could have done anything. Once crown rot sets in and the respiratory parts of the tree are killed, you can't turn back that. You can't turn back that clock. You can't turn back that moment in time. It's going to die. And this one died. And it was really a shame because this whole tree really set off that front yard and the corner of this particular neighborhood. It really did. On all plants and shrubs and trees, there is the crown area of that plant. And that is generally just above where the roots start to form and the trunk is called the crown. And there's a lot of respiratory exchange of oxygen and other stuff right there. And it is one of those parts of the tree that does not want to be buried in moist, wet earth. It does not. And that is where crown rot comes from. Imagine this. Imagine yourself. If you took your hand, took both your hands and put it over your mouth and nose, and you were told to hold your breath for 5 minutes. Now, I'm sure there's some of you out there that are so respiratory fit that you could hold it for 5 minutes. But for the rest of the world, no, you're gonna start gagging right around 15 to 30 seconds, and you're gonna need to breathe. Well, imagine a tree when you take all this dirt and you pile it up around a part of it where really it does a lot of breathing for itself. And then you say, go ahead, thrive. It's not gonna happen. It's just not. That's not what the crown was intended for. Now, like many of you say, we'll just use me as an example. Coach goes out one Saturday morning and he's got this project in the backyard in mind. And he says, nope, I took these things out here and today is the day I'm gonna replace them. And Coach goes down to the nursery and he goes to the nursery pro and he says, hey, pro, I need some plants. I got this project along my back fence and I wanna take care of it. And the nursery pro goes, sure, sun, shade, how tall, blah, 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 and we all figure that stuff out. Well, Coach plops down, say $500-600, and I buy the plants, I buy the perennials, I buy the soil amendment, I buy the starter fertilizers, I even bought the mulch to finish it all off and make it look great because that's what the nursery pro suggested. I get home and I start digging my holes and I get to it by noon and I'm done by 4 o'clock. And man, all my plants, my holes, I mix the soil 50-50 and put in the amount of starter fertilizer and I planted them down in there and I made my water basin and I watered them real good. I got all done and I mulched it up so it's got that new landscape look. I stood back, popped a beer about 5 o'clock. I'm gonna do a barbecue. Had a couple friends over and they said, hey, nice new project, looks good. So something happens. Something happens about 30 to 90 days later. And all of a sudden, my investment is starting to wilt. You know, the shrubby perennials are starting to wilt. The arborvitae or whatever I bought is starting to turn brown and yellow in the center. And oh man, I know we had some 80-degree days, but I didn't think it was that hot. But I'll water it a little bit more. And so you water it. And it still persists. As a matter of fact, it's starting to get a little worse on about half the investment we used. So I go to Reddit and I go on to, our landscaping and I post the picture of some of my plants and I ask the question, what the hell happened to my plants here? And we hear back, 25 different answers. And some of them say, oh, you need to water more, it's been hot. Hey, it's blooming, it requires more water. And then there's some guy called Yard Coach, and him and a couple other seemingly learned professionals go, check your planting depth, see how far, see if anything's settled in the planting holes, protect the crown, look for the crown of the plant, and see if that no soil or heavy-duty mulches are packed up around it. And sure enough, Matt goes out there and looks at it, and I can see that those plants have settled that far down into my beautifully crafted planting holes. And yep, crown rot. And so I lost half of my $500 investment. that I now have to go back and replace. And I got to check and excavate the soil out away from the rest of them because they too were starting to settle. Not quite as deep, but they were starting to settle. Does any of this sound familiar? Because I see it on Reddit and Facebook forums every single day, every day. And I can't attribute every single one of their plant demises to crown rot, but I'll bet you at least 50 to 70% of them are because people plant things too deep. It's just a natural tendency that amateurs tend to do. And I don't use amateur in a demeaning way. You don't make a living at it, so it makes you an amateur. So think about your planting depth. You literally want to have that crown protected by planting deliberately shallow. And when I say shallow, dig your hole just as deep as the root ball, and then about twice as wide. And then when you plant that, I would love for you to have that root ball sticking out of the planting hole after you've made your water basin about that far. Take a look at this little diagram that I found. This is the perfect way to plant a plant. It deliberately looks like you didn't know what the hell you were doing. As a matter of fact, another short story, I can remember countless times when I'm out there slaving away for somebody and the client comes out and says, hey, I was walking around seeing all the plantings and stuff, and what the hell are you doing? I mean, you're a professional, and yet look at my plants that you're putting in the ground. They look like you didn't plant them deep enough. Of course, in the most mustering decorum that I can come up with, I turn to them in this 100-degree day on my hands and knees, and I politely tell them, well, this is why I do what I do. And you know what it's like when someone's being flippant about it, and you turn around and you give them a very good explanation as to why it's happening. They kind of go, Rodney Dangerfield, you know? Yeah. So, and they turn around and go back in the air-conditioned house, and I continue to do my job. And you know something, guys? 20 plus years of landscape construction, tens upon tens of thousands of plants that I have put in the ground. I've only replaced three warranted plants, and I always warranted my plants for 30 days. 3 warranted plants, and I never had a problem replacing plants. If the people followed the instructions that I gave them at the close of a project during our walkthrough that I always did, if something still died for some reason, I had no problem going back and replace them. But out of the tens and tens of thousands, I replaced 3. 1 was a tree, 2 were shrubs. You know, anytime a homeowner does a little bit of due diligence and finds out how expensive landscaping is, and they go to the nursery and they look at 1-gallon plants, 5-gallon plants, 15-gallon trees, etc., and you see price tags accordingly to like $10, $40, $90 to $130 for a 15-gallon tree, and sometimes more. Bald and burlap trees that go anywhere from $90 to $300 plus dollars. These are investments in your home, you know, in your property that you can ill afford unless you just hit 6 out of 6 with a bonus. You know, you can ill afford to not plant them correctly and to start throwing away hundreds and hundreds of dollars in a landscape expense. It's just foolish. And the other thing about it is it's so preventable, so preventable. Now, let's take a look at trees, because trees are generally, you know, you can find some 5-gallon starter trees, they're out there, but most of the time we buy them the 15-gallon pot, ones with the little handle on them, and we go and plant them. Now, in a containerized plant, you go out and buy yourself a 15-gallon autumn blaze maple, and you want to put it out in the front yard because you saw one of the neighbors had one, you love the fall color. Well, in that containerized plant, there is the crown. We've already discussed about that. There's also something called a root flare. A root flare is below the crown where you find that trunk and the roots actually starting to separate, and you'll see those roots actually coming and going out into the ground. Yep, I said root flare. It is another term that you're going to have to remember today. Root flare. You know, take a look at some of these specimens as we're going through. This is where Mother Nature and God truly know how to plant. Okay, we are stupid when it comes to planting in some cases. But you take a look at this. These are the ones that Mother Nature put in the ground. And look at the root flares. They're perfect. They're absolutely perfect. And the only time you see a little bit of the root flare or the crown covered up is from the organic leaf matter that falls in the fall. Now I'm coming to you from the eastern part of Tennessee in the beautiful Appalachian Mountains. And I have taken the time to go around with Maestro and actually take pictures of crowns and root flares. Now, when we do ornamental stuff in our own landscapes at our homes, it gets a little difficult to create root flares like this. Not for a decade, maybe 20 years, you'll see a distinct root flare start as the tree matures. And you'll see that root flare go down into the ground, and that's where that structural stabilization starts and then goes off into that root system where all the food is processed and produced and then shoved back up to the leaf structure. So what we've talked about today is the crown of the plant and the root flare, and those are on all trees and all shrubs. Even going down into perennials, even going down into annuals. Have you ever planted a pansy and in a week all of a sudden it goes and just wilts, okay? There are crown rots and diseases that affect things like pansies. And the only exception that I have ever made to planting like I've instructed today, the only one I will deliberately plant deep is, answer the comment in the comments below, is the tomato. I do plant my tomatoes just a little bit up that trunk because the tomato plant has a great way of throwing out structurally strong roots from that additional trunk that's buried, and it makes a much more stable tomato later in the season when you got all kinds of weight in there. So that's the only exception that I have. So what have we learned today? Well, we've talked about a breathing part of the plant called the crown. Do not bury it too deep in the ground. I will guarantee you it will fail. We've talked about the root flare on planting your trees and stuff. Make sure that that root ball is sticking up. You can see coming out of the trunk area, you can visibly see the root flare on your trees. And we learned about the one exception, our annual tomatoes that we put in our vegetable garden. Hey, if you would like to learn just a skosh more and really bump up your education and know-how, you know, I invite you to check out our website. We have a wonderful, easy read book that we have created for you called Landscaping Simplified. And if you're taking on a project yourself and you'd love to save a lot of money and do it yourself, then I might ask you to check out our digital course, Homescape 1.0. We're taking pre-orders right now through email, and it'll be ready to go next week. Next week, it'll be up and ready to go. So check that out. Here's the website address listed right here. And we look forward to any sort of inquiries. If you have questions before you purchase, the email is always there too. So, I'm Matt. You can call me Coach. I appreciated your time and I appreciate you sticking with me all the way to the end. I hope to see you next Friday and every Friday right here. Don't forget to check out Plan of the Week. Hey, how about that podcast if you're out driving to work one day? Great time on the radio or in your headphones while you're jogging or biking. I'll catch you guys next week. Take care. Don't forget the checklist. Bye-bye for now.